Good morning, everyone. Happy holidays and welcome to First Things First. Monday morning with you here. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That is Nick Wright. Chris Broussard is with us.
Hello.
Thanks so much for spending some time with us this
Glad
morning.
to be here.
Not to belabor the point, Jenna Wolfe, you got a haircut.
All of them.
I like it.
You got a very nice haircut. This
Yeah.
is the most different hairstyle you've had since we've been on the show.
We did it in increments.
It looks
It's
very
sharp.
good.
Yeah, we went short and then I said, shorter!
looks
And this
very
is
good.
it. Thank you very much. I figured you
Good
were the
to see
hair
you.
guy most of the year,
Always
Nick.
good to see you.
Jumping on your corner. We have a ton of football to talk about on this program, so let us jump right in. With arguably the biggest game on Sunday, that would be the Cowboys and the Eagles, Dak versus Wentz from Philadelphia. First quarter, Wentz came out motivated, finds tight end Dallas Goedert for the 6-yard touchdown to put the Eagles up 10-0. Jump to the end of the third. This time, Miles Sanders getting in on it. Touchdown. Philly up 17-6. Sanders with 156 total yards. Dak and the boys with one more chance, 4th and 8. Not good. It was supposed to be to Michael Gallup. It was a miss. Eagles defense coming up huge as they did all day long yesterday. Philly wins. They now clinch a playoff berth next week if they beat the Giants. Here is Carson Wentz after the game.
Just like we said the last few weeks, our backs were against the wall, and guys made plays. Defense played great. Offensively, we definitely left some plays and some points out there, but man, it feels good to get this victory.
So the Dallas Cowboys could have clinched their second straight NFC East title. Instead, they now need help next week if they want to do that. Nick, did the Eagles win this game, or did the Cowboys lose it yesterday?
With respect to Philadelphia, who I picked to win the game, who I think is the better team, and who clearly played better yesterday, the Cowboys lost this game. This game was not about the Eagles finally all of a sudden putting things together, even though Carson Wentz, who I know we're going to talk about, played one of the best games he's ever played as a pro, all things considered. This was about, in the biggest game of the season, the Dallas Cowboys scoring 0 touchdowns. This was about, in the biggest game of the year, the Cowboys offense going 3 and out, getting a field goal, then 4 and out, in the first half for the first 5 possessions of the first half. This was about, once again, some head-scratching play calling. Whether it was the first drive of the second half saying, hey, one of the biggest plays of our season, let's run a speed option to our 5th best offensive player, Tony Pollard, all the way to the final offensive play, the final meaningful offensive play the Cowboys will have all year, a 4th and 8, 4th and your season. And on the field on that play is Blake Jarwin, Jason Witten, Tavon Austin, and Michael Gallup. Not on the field on that play is Amari Cooper, who supposedly turned your entire season around last year, or Randall Cobb, who was one of your few major offseason additions. So Dak's commentary, we give Dak a lot of credit for having great quarterback speak. Dak and Jason Garrett, if you watch their commentary after the game, either failed to grasp or just didn't want to acknowledge the gravity of the situation. Only Jason Garrett did. Only Jerry Jones did. Jerry Jones understood it's a wrap now, fellas. Jason Garrett was out here talking about all we can do is look on to next week. Dak is here saying we no longer control our own destiny, but your season is over. Because in the biggest spot of the year, you scored 0 touchdowns, and 6 of your 9 points came because of short fields due to Philly missed field goals. It is a devastatingly disappointing finish to a devastatingly disappointing season.
I agree with everything you said, except you saying Philadelphia is the better team, especially yesterday when their guys are hurt. So Dallas, look, the game plan. Let's start with the game plan. Dallas beat themselves, but let's start with the game plan. Ezekiel Elliott in his career against Philadelphia, 115 yards a game, okay? They're 5-0 in those games. Yesterday, you give him 13 carries?
47 yards.
How is that the game plan? I mean, were they scared off by Philadelphia being what? 3rd-ranked defense, rush defense in the league, 2nd-ranked, 3rd-ranked? Last year, they were 6th-ranked. The year before that, they were the 1st-ranked rush defense.
What were they ranked?
Still ran the ball against them.
And this year, when Zeke ran all over them in their first matchup.
They were up there. So the game plan from the start was problematic. Your quarterback is dealing with a shoulder injury, and you throw the ball 44 times. You mentioned Tony Pollard on the 3rd and 1. They had 4 3rd and 1s. Twice they gave the ball to Zeke.
What happened?
Twice he got the first downs. Pollard gets it, fumbles. Now, Zeke did call himself out of that play. So, an option with Pollard, I don't hate as much as I would have hated it with Zeke. I would have liked you to go up the middle with Zeke, but Pollard's in there, you do that. The other one, they throw a pass to Amari Cooper, a sprint pass that's incomplete. So their game planning from the get-go was off. Not to mention the fact that last week, the one time you look like yourselves this year, the one time people say, okay, that's the Cowboys team.
They finally put it all together.
It was because you ran the ball. You ran it like 36 times with Zeke and Tony Pollard. They gained like almost 250 yards. And so the game planning was horrible from the start. And then and don't tell me, oh, they got down 10-0, they couldn't run. It was still early. It was way early enough.
To your point on that, Broussard, in the entire second half, the Cowboys had 11 offensive plays down 2 scores. They were never out of the game.
Right.
They could have. In the first half, I don't care if you're down 10-0 in the first half, you can stay committed to the run. And in the second half, you only had 11 plays down 2 scores. They could have stayed committed to the run.
And that's not to mention just the sheer mistakes and missed opportunities. Dak Prescott missed Tavon Austin on a go route that would have been 6. Mm-hmm. Michael Gallup drops a pass on the last critical possession. That's right in your hands. My dad used to say it when I was growing up. It hits you in a bad spot, the hands. You know what I mean? How do you drop that pass? And so they just blew opportunity after opportunity. Another thing with the game plan, if you run the ball, which you've proven you can against this team, then you keep Wentz off the field. You mentioned how great he played. He was great. But if you run the football, you keep him off the field. So the game plan from the start was flawed, and that's why I say the Cowboys beat themselves.
And on those 3 plays, deep pass to Tavon Austin. Now, to Tavon's credit, he's open, but you miss it. A deep pass to Michael Gallup. To Dak's credit, he made a good throw. Gallup dropped it. And then the 4th down throw that we talked about to Michael Gallup in the end zone. How is Amari Cooper's name not involved? Ezekiel Elliott's name not involved? Even Randall Cobb's name not involved? This is how you end up being one of the most disappointing teams in football.
Well, that's just it. And we wondered whether last week was the real Dallas Cowboy team and that nice win over the Rams, or we wondered if it was all the weeks leading up to it. And after they put together that great game last week, they came back out and they did all the things they've done wrong. They didn't run the ball enough. They fell behind early, which was a theme for them. The play calling was questionable. So I'll ask you, is this the most disappointing season you can remember the Cowboys having, with how healthy they are and with how stacked they are with their talent?
Well, I'd have to go through the history books. I know that there were 3 straight years in the early 2010s when they had a win-in-your-end scenario in Week 17 and they lost. I know that there were a bunch of Tony Romo years that people feel like they underachieved. What I know is this was a playoff game. You were playing a team that allowed 27 to Washington twice, allowed 27 to Detroit, allowed 38 to Miami, 37 to you guys, and 38 to Minnesota. And how did you respond? With no touchdowns? A Philly team that hadn't looked good for over a month? And you respond by letting them control the entire game. It is a wildly disappointing season and as disappointing of a game as any team's had all year.
To answer your question, Jenna, I would say, I mean, you hit it on the head. There have been, how many disappointing Cowboys seasons in the last 25 years have there been? But with the context, with a lot of people expecting them, I feel stupid now. I picked them to get to the Super Bowl. I was one of many. So people thinking they could go to the Super Bowl, the money you spent this offseason, Ezekiel Elliott, all the way down the line, thinking you're going to pay Dak to make him the highest paid quarterback in the land. I think all of those things considered, this has to be right up there as the most disappointing.
All right, well, we talked about all week for Carson Wentz what this game's mean to him. We said this was probably the biggest game of his career. Time now for a Put a Grade on It, sponsored by CarMax. So Wentz saved his best for Week 16, completed 78% of his passes, 319 yards, and a touchdown, and no turnovers. Nick, put a grade on Carson Wentz's performance.
Gets an A+. It's the first playoff game of his career, essentially, and he delivered highest completion percentage of any game this season, highest yards per attempt of any game this season, second most yards of any game this season. Carson Wentz in this scenario gets an A+.
Yeah, I give him an A. I would have went A+ if they scored more points, but I give him an A. Look, your top 3 wide receivers are out. Your favorite target, Zach Ertz, gets hurt.
Yep.
And, he's playing sparingly during the game, so I give him an A.
Here we go. Top story of the morning. Dallas Cowboys, who lost to the Eagles yesterday, now need to beat Washington and then hope that Philadelphia loses to the Giants next week in order to get into the playoffs. As for yesterday's game, Dak Prescott struggled, completing just 57% of his passes. Keep in mind, he'd been dealing with an injured shoulder all week. Regardless, Cowboys can't pull it out, and a lot of that falls on head coach Jason Garrett.
We didn't get the job done, but we have to control what we can control. And that's our preparation leading up to the game next week against Washington.
Nick, is there anything at this point that Jason Garrett can do to save his job?
No. And
even if they win and they get into the playoffs?
I refused last week to engage in the fantasy that Dallas was all of a sudden going to go on some magical run, that after being one team through 13 weeks, because they played a good game in their 14th game, that was then going to be their 15th game, their 16th game, and on some playoff. No. And I'm going to listen, there's a fair amount of stuff on this show that I predict or I say, and it turns out I'm wrong about. This is not one of them. I said after the Patriot game, you fire that head coach. And the answer was no, you can't. It's a short week. And then when they get crushed by Buffalo on Thanksgiving at home, I said, now it's not a short week anymore. You fire the head coach. No, we can't. And then they get crushed by the Bears. And now you have a long week. And I said, you fire the head coach. And I'm just curious, if at any point they had done that, would they be in a worse position than they are now? Of course not. Because this team was 3-0. They've lost 8 of 12. They were 5-3 at the midway point. What are they now? They're 7-9. We can do that math. They are 7-8. Pardon me. 7-9 is maybe a little bit of a projection. There is to me no argument to be had that Jason Garrett should retain this job. And in my eyes, there is no possibility that they make the Super Bowl, which is at this point the only way he could retain his job.
I think, obviously, like you said, it would take a football miracle. They get in, they beat Washington, the Eagles lose, which I'm not convinced the Eagles will win that game. I'm going to be honest. Now, I'm not going to go all the way with the miracle and say they get in the playoffs, then they win 2 games and get to the conference championship, which might be enough in Jerry Jones's eyes to save his job. It wouldn't be enough in my eyes. In my eyes, he would have to get to the Super Bowl to save his job. Okay, but in Jerry's eyes, maybe if they get to the conference championship. But I think the playoffs is possible just because I'm not convinced that Philadelphia is that good. Philadelphia was riding, obviously you're hyped up for that game yesterday. In addition to all that was at stake, it is a rivalry, and they hadn't beaten Dallas in a while, especially with Zeke and Dak playing. So they go into there, they're on an emotional high, they get the win. I wouldn't be shocked to see a letdown, especially with the Giants, coming off a big win and maybe thinking Daniel Jones is special. But even if they get in, that's not enough. Look, I think they've had plenty of opportunities to fire him before, and nobody could have said anything. His first 3 years, they were 8-8. You mentioned Tony Romo earlier. Tony Romo played all but one of those games in his first 3 years, and they went 8-8. He's been there 9 full seasons now, 3 winning records. 3 times, if they don't make these playoffs, 3 times out of 9 you're in the playoffs and you're retaining your job? No.
And losing enormous games at the end of the regular season has happened more often than not. 2011, 2012, 2013. You lose in week 17. Week 17 to miss the playoffs. 2 years ago, the first game after Zeke's suspension. Remember that? When they have an opportunity after winning the last 3 games of Zeke's suspension to get into the playoff picture. You lose a critical game to Seattle. And this year in week 16, you lose this game to Philadelphia. And I want to just go back quickly to that final offensive play. It's 4th and 8. Amari Cooper says he's not winded in the postgame commentary. They just have the regular rotation of guys. I know Jason Garrett is not your de facto play caller anymore. That's Kellen Moore. The head coach of that football team in that spot with your season on the line, if he sees on the field is Jason Witten, Blake Jarwin, Tavon Austin, Michael Gallup, you got 3 timeouts. You don't need them if you don't get the first down anyway. The game's over. You make sure your best players are on the field. You make sure Randall Cobb and Amari Cooper are on the field in a spot like that, and they didn't do it.
Nick, honestly, it felt like they had benched Cooper. Because there were several times in critical situations that he wasn't on the field, even before that. Now, so Cooper, as bad as it was, to your point, that didn't surprise me as much as Cobb. Cobb had just had a big catch, and he's obviously a good possession receiver. The fact that he wasn't on the field either is just ridiculous.
All that, plus the fact that Ezekiel Elliott was limited after what he did last week, after the money you paid him coming into the season, after the fact that you were going to essentially be a running team because he's your best player, even though Kellen Moore had 3 great opening weeks with Dak Prescott. It just seems like this all falls on the head coach at some point, probably soon. Broussard, we have been debating Dak versus Wentz all season, and it culminated in 2 7-7 teams going out there yesterday and battling. Did what you saw yesterday put an end to the Dak versus Wentz debate?
Not at all. I'm still with Dak. Now, I think Wentz is the better physical talent. There's no question about that. He's a better passer of the football. But one win, a regular season win over a dysfunctional Dallas Cowboys team when you only score 17 points is not going to convince me that you've arrived. Arrive by winning a playoff game or 2, especially when a lot of your players won a Super Bowl already, a lot of your teammates. Dak Prescott has won a playoff game. Dak Prescott is 39-23 as a starter. Carson Wentz 30-24 as a starter. Dak Prescott still has a higher QBR and passer rating this year, has thrown for more yards, way more yards than Carson Wentz has. Dak Prescott has proven he is a leader of men. He is a leader. I'm not saying he's perfect. He's got a lot of room to grow. But he is a leader of men. You don't question his leadership, and neither do his teammates in that locker room. Carson Wentz, are we convinced he could go into Dallas and handle that locker room? Because he had trouble handling the locker room in Philadelphia, and I don't think it's a coincidence that when a lot of the veterans got hurt, now you got these young guys that just want to prove that they can play in the NFL, following his lead. And credit to them, and somewhat discredit to the veterans who weren't following his lead. But I still have questions about the intangibles with Carson Wentz. He's been great the last few weeks. I do think he's growing in those intangibles, but I'm not convinced he could lead an Ezekiel Elliott and Amari Cooper. These big personalities that they have in Dallas, not to mention the circus atmosphere that Dak Prescott has to maneuver. So I still think it's up for debate who's the better quarterback.
Yeah, going into the year, I didn't think it was debatable. I thought it was Carson. And I understood the numbers, and I understood that Dak, over the course of their entire careers going into this season, had better numbers than Carson. A lot of that work was done Dak's rookie season when he was extraordinary and Carson Wentz was a typical rookie quarterback. Years 2 and 3, Carson was clearly the better player, but he had gotten hurt. And the question for me with Carson Wentz going into this season was, can he stay healthy for a full season? Can he win a game like this? Well, he's healthy for the full year. He just won a game like this. He was better coming out of college. That's why he was the 2nd overall pick and Dak was a 4th round pick. His peak has been higher. That's why he was on his way to winning an MVP. And Dak, his rookie year, was a contender, but not really. And since then, nowhere close. And the eye test to me has always been about Carson. What Dak has gotten credit for is winning games like this one. And in the biggest game of the year, Dak no-showed. And in the biggest game of the year, Carson Wentz, without any of his weapons, had the highest completion percentage he's had all year, the most yards per attempt he's had all year, one of his 4 highest passer ratings all year, and the 2nd most total yards he's thrown for all year in what was essentially Carson Wentz's de facto first playoff game. I know he doesn't get a playoff win for it, but if they lose, they're eliminated. And let's compare that to Dak, where Dak this year, show him against the high-quality opponents. Dak Prescott's numbers this year against projected division winners, Saints, Packers, Eagles twice, and the Patriots. That's terrible. And 2 of those touchdowns against the projected division winners came in garbage time against the Green Bay Packers in the game they were down 31-3. Dak's going to mop up the mediocre to bad teams. But this year against New Orleans, no Teddy Bridgewater when you're 3-0. 0 touchdowns, 1 pick, a 73 rating. Against Green Bay, coming off that loss, you're down 31-3, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. In New England, 0 touchdowns, 1 pick. Against Philadelphia yesterday, 0 touchdowns, a 75 passer rating. I needed Dak to prove this to me overwhelmingly this year, Chris, because my gut told me, man, when I watch these guys, one of these guys I look at and I say, that guy can be a star quarterback. Another guy I look at and I say, if everything around him's just right, he can play really well. And he's not going to kill me. And so to me, the debate won't be over for years, I'm sure. But Carson Wentz further confirmed what I already believed, which is he's the better of the 2 players.
See, I'm big on intangibles as a quarterback. What made Tom Brady and Joe Montana the greatest ever? The intangibles. Sure. It wasn't just the physical tools. I agree, Carson has the greater physical tools, but I think Dak clearly has the better intangibles. Now, Carson took a big step yesterday, but again, it still was a regular season game against a 7-7 team.
But look who Carson was working with, and look who Dak's been working with. Dak had his full artillery there.
Right.
Carson had guys he had to ask who their last name was that he was throwing the ball to.
Dak had how many drop passes? 6 yesterday. Now, granted, he missed some throws too. Some high throws, some overthrows.
That he did
and he had a bad shoulder,
too. Shoulder all week.
Another intangible that no excuses. I go out there and I play. So I'm with you on Carson's physical ability and the eye test. But when I look at the locker room, look at the leadership, all of that, that's where I side with Dak. And I've never thought Dak was a guy that could carry a team. But when certain things are in place, I think he's a leader of men and can help you win a Super Bowl.
Just very quickly here before we move on. I understand the leadership point. But these last 3 weeks, that might be how you become a leader of men in the locker room. He hasn't been around to play December football. His rookie year, they're not any good. His second year, he gets hurt. His third year, he gets hurt. A come-from-behind win against the Giants, a come-from-behind win against Washington, and then a great win to keep your season alive and essentially almost de facto win the division against your hated rival Dallas. All of a sudden, he now has had those opportunities to win over maybe some of the skepticism in the locker room, and maybe he's done it over the last 3 weeks when he was great in the previous 2 games in the fourth quarter and then great throughout yesterday.
Patriots hosting the Buffalo Bills. First quarter, time winding down. Tom Brady finds tight end Matt LaCosse for an 8-yard touchdown to cap off a 75-yard drive that made it 7-3. To the fourth, now 1st and goal, just over 5 minutes left. Rex Burkhead, shedding 2 tacklers, gets into the end zone. Pats up 24-17. One last chance for Buffalo. 4th and goal. Josh Allen scrambling. Tries to find Cole Beasley, but he can't. Patriots hold on to win their 11th straight AFC East title. Brady finishes with 271 yards and a touchdown. All right, Nick, did this game prove that we actually can trust the Patriots now in the playoffs?
It did not prove it to me. I still think they're going to be one and done in the playoffs. I believe they're going to lose at home against the Kansas City Chiefs in round 2. Now, what this win did do was it almost assured their first playoff game is going to be in round 2. It keeps them in position for the bye, and if they beat Miami, which we assume they will get that bye. But whether it proved it to me or not, let me do something I haven't done very often over the last 10 weeks because they haven't deserved it very often. Let me give the Patriots, most notably the guy over my shoulder, Tom Brady, immense credit. This was the best game Tom Brady has played in at least 2 months. This was the best game the Patriots have played in at least 2 months. Brady looked sharp. The 2-point conversion play at the very end, which was a critical play. That whole last drive's different.
Yep.
If you're up 5 instead of up 7. Up 7, you can play with more confidence. You can maybe take a few more chances because you know a touchdown doesn't beat you. That 2-point conversion play to Edelman was sensational. That play pass to Matt LaCosse. LaCosse isn't some great player. That was great. And he avoided the rush. He threw the ball away when he needed to. You didn't have to hear the announcers blaming his receivers for all his missed throws because he wasn't missing throws. I thought this was the best game we have seen Tom Brady play, honestly, against quality opponent since the Chargers playoff game in the divisional round last year. So I still don't believe in the Patriots. In fact, my gut tells me this game is, especially as more people seem to be jumping onto, could Tom Brady be a Charger next year, something we talked about a few weeks ago. I do wonder, Broussard, if this will be remembered as Tom Brady's last great Patriot performance, especially against a quality opponent. I'll mark that down and see if we come back to it. But he was sensational. The team was excellent. And that Bills team is legit. And they beat them. They didn't beat them handily. The Bills had plenty of opportunities. But the Patriot offense, against what I consider to be an excellent defense, performed at a higher level than they have since October, at least.
If by trust you mean, are the Patriots now the favorite in the AFC to get back to the Super Bowl? No. I don't trust them, if that's what you mean by trust. If by trust you mean they have a legitimate shot at winning the AFC and you wouldn't be surprised in the least if they win the AFC, then yes, I trust them. I'm giving them a legitimate shot. And everything you said, Nick, you're right. But why? Why all of a sudden out of the blue? Why this team that has struggled, and I'm not saying, as you brought up before in the past, that they're holding back during the regular season, that they just, they're hiding things. They're not, exposing their full arsenal and things like that in the regular season. I'm saying this team is a bunch of gamers. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, the leaders of that team, they make those guys gamers. So it's no coincidence that, as you said, Brady has his best game arguably of the season. It's no coincidence that all of a sudden this team that wasn't that physical apparently on the offensive end is able to out-physical the Buffalo Bills, who are one of the greatest defensive teams in the league. They run all of a sudden for 150 yards. Sony Michel, Buffalo stacked the box. Mm-hmm. And Sony Michel is still able to run for almost 100 yards on 21 carries. So the fact that they were able to do all those things, the fact that Tom Brady finds 7 different receivers for 3 or more catches. The fact that it wasn't all Edelman, all James White in the passing games. He's finding all these other guys. Those aren't coincidences. They're the second team in the last 7 weeks with Baltimore to score more than 20 points against this Buffalo defense. Yep. We know we don't have any concerns about the Patriots defense. Now the offense all of a sudden is fine, just like they did against Kansas City. Gronk didn't have a good year last year, but when push came to shove, all of a sudden Gronk shows up. I think that's some of what you saw yesterday.
I mean, who cares if they hadn't done it? They did it enough to get the record they have. They did it enough to win the game they needed to win. They did it enough to put themselves in a position where they could get the first round bye. Why don't you think they can just rinse and repeat, Nick? Why don't you think they can do what they did yesterday a couple more rounds?
The same reason I didn't think the Cowboys could duplicate the performance against the Rams. Because you are what you've been over the totality of a season.
They were that last year, Nick, though. They were 11-5. They had a worse record last year, lost to Miami.
They had a worse record last year, but what they had last year was when the passing game started to deteriorate, they transitioned who they were. They had a better offensive line. They had one of the best blocking tight ends ever who duplicated himself as one of the best receiving tight ends ever in Gronk. And they had that fullback they love so much in James Devlin. They have none of that this year. Again, Saturday was an excellent performance. I watched it and I was continually impressed by the throws Brady made. And again, if the receivers all of a sudden are good enough for that performance, then I do wonder how much of the Patriots' lack of offense wasn't the receivers that everyone just wants to crush, and was the fact that the quarterback hadn't been playing well. The quarterback played great against an awesome defense on Saturday. From week 6 to 15, he was 25th or worst in every major passing category in the NFL. He was as good as, I thought he was the best quarterback of the weekend with respect to Daniel Jones this past weekend. I don't think that's going to happen again. I do think that if the Tom Curran report's right, that this could be the last season for Brady in New England. Not the last season for Brady ever. The last season for Brady in New England. This might go down as his last great Patriot game, but it was a great Patriot game. And to your guys' point, If they can do this repeatedly, that performance offensively is good enough to make the Super Bowl, because the Ravens defense, as good as it is not as good as the Bills defense. The Chiefs defense, as good as it's been playing, is not as good as the Bills defense. I just don't think, Broussard, they can repeat it. I don't think it's not who they were even against Cincinnati for the first half. It wasn't who they were the previous 5 weeks. I don't think all of a sudden they became this team. I think they played an awesome game that they had to have to keep the bye, and they performed at that level.
All I'm saying is you're talking about the quarterback like it's not Tom Brady. He can duplicate this type of performance. We've seen it time and time again. And to your point about, you are who you were the first 16 weeks, that's last year they looked bad. You could have given that same spiel a year ago. And it would have been appropriate.
But last year they had also beaten some very high-quality opponents. This year I haven't seen
Buffalo.
Oh, fair enough. And Buffalo's good. You say I'm talking like it's not Tom Brady. I think I'm the only person, one of the only people, talking like it's a 42-year-old man playing quarterback, and that's what he's looked like for the majority of this season. Saturday, he was brilliant, and no one will have more egg on their face than me. In the whole world, if he keeps this going, I wouldn't bet on him.
Back here, First Things First, now joined by former NFL head coach Eric Mangini.
What's up, Coach? Good morning. Good to see you.
Coach?
Can I give a nice shout out to your son who's in studio? Hey, Zach, how you doing? Nice to see you back there. All right, only I can see him. Coach, let's talk about... What's that?
He's hidden.
Yeah. Biggest game of the weekend. Cowboys visiting the Eagles. Dak versus Wentz. First quarter. Wentz came out motivated. Finds tight end Dallas Goedert for the 6-yard TD. Puts the Eagles up 10-0. Jump to the end of the third now. This time Miles Sanders gets in on it. Touchdown Philly. Puts them up 17-6. Sanders, 156 total yards. Cowboys would have one more chance. 4th and 8. Dak to Michael Gallup. That's a miss. Eagles defense coming up big as they did all day long. Philly wins. They can clinch a playoff berth next week with a win over the Giants. All right, Nick, did the Eagles win this game or did the Cowboys lose it?
As much as I would love to give full credit to the Philadelphia Eagles, because last week I said I thought they could win. I thought a better coach, better quarterback, at home, all those reasons. And the quarterback was excellent. Carson Wentz was, I thought, fantastic. As good as you can be in a game where your team only scores 17 points. I thought Carson was yesterday. To me, this is more about the Cowboys once again reminding us you have no reason to believe that this team is going to be able to repeat a quality performance week over week unless they are playing the dregs of the NFL. The biggest game of the year, no touchdowns. Biggest game of the year, 6 of your 9 points come on short field goals because the Eagles had missed a field goal themselves. One of your biggest plays early in the game is a speed option to your 5th best offensive player on a 3rd and 1 when you have the ball after halftime with a chance after you got that field goal right before halftime to maybe steal some momentum back. That ends in a fumble. And on your biggest play of the season, 4th and 8, 4th in the season on the line, your most skilled pass catcher, Amari Cooper, is on the sideline. Your 2nd most skilled pass catcher, Randall Cobb, is on the sideline. And you have a collection of Michael Gallup, who's been good, Blake Jarwin, Jason Witten, who wasn't in football last year, and Tavon Austin, who teams have been trying to find a way to use Tavon Austin since he was at West Virginia. And so, to me, this was the Cowboys again failing to show up in the biggest spot of the year. That's my biggest takeaway from the game, Coach.
Yeah, there's definitely a combination of things, and you look at the Eagles, and you hate to see this in a game that's this big, but they came out so much more aggressively than the Cowboys. They came out with a higher level of intensity, more
urgency,
all of that, and it's shocking to see that with a game with so much on the line, and then you combine that with the fact that they had the volume of injuries that they had, and I thought it was great. I thought it was great that guys like Dallas Goedert stepped up, or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, players that they were hoping for more from earlier in the season, and really were able to produce in this big game. And then the Dallas side of it, your point on the last play to not have your best players in, that is inexcusable. And look, I've been in those situations as a head coach where you have rotations of players, and you'll bring guys in because that's when they're supposed to be spelled, and it's to keep them at a high level throughout the course of the game. But all that goes out the window on key plays. Big third downs, red zone plays, 2-minute drives. Forget about the rotation. You put your best guys in, and that sometimes can get lost as a head coach, but it shouldn't, and it definitely shouldn't in a game like this.
On that note, just to follow up real quick, Coach, is it you that has said, I don't know if you came up with it or someone else, think players, not plays?
Ted Marchibroda used to say this all the time, is in those key moments, you always think players, not plays. And look, your best players on the sidelines, you just can't have it. And it's those types of mistakes, decisions, wherever you want to classify those things that have killed the Cowboys.
Because even if it was a Kellen Moore decision, Jason Garrett should have jumped in.
You have to overrule it. You have to.
Yeah.
It's like your best pass rusher out on a key third down defensively. Yeah, granted, he may be tired. But
on that
him
play,
tired is better than the next guy fully fresh and ready to go.
The Cowboys beat themselves, and as you said, all respect to the Eagles. To come out there with all the injuries they had and do what they did, they get tons of respect for that. They played a great game. But the Cowboys lost this game. They beat themselves. The game plan from the start was flawed. It's as simple as that. If you look at their history against the Eagles since they've had Zeke and Dak, they've run the football. Ezekiel Elliott has averaged 115 yards a game in his career against the Eagles. And oh, by the way, they're 5-0 in those games. The last 4 times he's played the Eagles, he's had over 100 yards. And you give him the ball 13 times to carry it, and Dak Prescott's battling a shoulder injury, and you throw it 44 times, 43 times, whatever it was with him. I mean, the game plan to me was flawed from the get-go. 3rd and 1. You brought up the Tony Pollard play, the option. They have 4 3rd and 1s. Twice they gave the ball to Zeke, and he gets the first down both times. The other time they give it to Pollard, fumble, cost them at least 3 points, okay? Then the next time they throw a sprint pass to Amari Cooper, and it's incomplete. So my point is, they should have come into this game thinking we are going to run the football down the Eagles' throats. It also would keep Wentz off the field. Wentz has been playing great the last few weeks. It would keep him off the field. And I know they were down, Coach, 10-0, but that was early. That was the first quarter.
No, look, I understand what you're saying, but the one thing the Eagles did really well defensively going into this game was stopping the run. They were 3rd against the run going into the game, and you could see very early on there was a commitment to force Dak Prescott to win the game for the Cowboys. Now, I do agree with you that the number of carries that Zeke got is too low. I don't think you can kill them for the rationale of our receivers are better than their DBs at this point. Our protection is better than their pass rush at this point. I don't think that's a flawed assumption, but I do think numerically the distribution of run to pass was
but
too
they were
one way.
2 years ago, Philly had the best rush defense in the league. Cowboys ran it down their throat. Last year, they had the 6th best rush defense in the league. Cowboys ran it down their throat. So I think you got to go with what we do best. If that's what you defend best,
they won
let's do it.
with that exact game plan. They won, and they beat a pretty good team, and one thought maybe they would sort of break out that same game plan this week.
Yeah, I agree. The numbers are too low, but you don't also want to hit your head against the wall over and over again. There's some days where that's just not what's working for you. Should they have given it more run? Yeah, I think they should have given it more of a chance. But that is the area of strength that the Eagles did come into the game with. It seemed like Zeke got
going later more. Because you're right, early in the game, they were defending him well against the run. It seemed like later in the game,
it makes it hard on those drives
yards.
when you're, it's 2nd and 10, 2nd and 11. It puts you behind the sticks so often.
And we can disagree on the level to which this is the case. But they called 47 pass plays and 15 running plays. Because Dak threw the ball 44 times, got sacked twice, ran the ball once. There's 47. Zeke had 13 carries. Pollard had 2. There's your 15. Can't have a 3-1 pass-to-run discrepancy in a game where you are down 10-0 early, but it's super early. In the entire second half, they ran 11 plays down 2 scores. So there was never really a time where you had to abandon the run. And I do think back to the Cowboys era that America's team was built on. Man, folks knew they were running. And guess what? You had Larry Allen, you had Emmitt Smith, you had Nate Newton, and it's like, you know what? Stop us. And you might say, okay, well, they don't have Larry Allen. He's maybe the greatest guard ever. Okay, you have 3 of the highest paid offensive linemen in football. You have the highest paid running back in football. It's your biggest game of the year. So I understand that.
Look, it'd be nice if whoever you paid the most was your best performer. Like if that was the only equation, the Browns at different points would be good. But that's not the only equation. You have to actually pay the guys that go out and perform on a consistent level, which they haven't been getting this year from their offensive line.
But you would figure you put your trust in Zeke over an injured Dak.
Yeah, but the flip side to that is, let's just say, leave the run, because I think we all agree to a different level. They should have run the ball more. The other thing is, why were you not more effective on those 47 dropbacks? Why against a defense that allowed 27 to Washington twice, allowed 27 to Detroit, allowed 37 to Miami, that you put 37 up against, that allowed 38 to Minnesota, could you not get in the end zone? Why, even the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, their secondary was susceptible. Like, this has been an ongoing issue for Philadelphia. Dak supposedly turned down $35+ million a year. Nope, I'm more of a $40 million a year type of player. Didn't look like it yesterday. Amari Cooper, a guy who's looking for a contract this offseason, when he was on the field was not that effective, and to your point, was not on the field on the single biggest play of their season. It is, we can point blame at everyone because everyone deserves blame. This is an institutional failure by the team to come out this flat early and to never rally in what was essentially a playoff game.
And I do think you need to give some credit to Philadelphia.
Absolutely.
As much as we want to kill Dallas, you got to give those coaches a lot of credit. You got to give a guy like Jim Schwartz, a veteran defensive coordinator, a lot of credit for changing up the game plan. And there's another disadvantage Dallas had. You have a young first-year coordinator versus a guy with a ton of experience in a critical game, and you could see that in those key moments, Jim Schwartz came out on top.
All right, well, as poorly as the Cowboys played, all hope is not lost. They still need to win next week, and if Philadelphia loses, they can still get in the playoffs. All right, Nick, is there any chance Jason Garrett can still save his job at this point?
No. Listen, Coach, who I adore, thinks I'm on here on television always firing.
Here comes the asterisk.
No. But it's for the record, it's just flatly, it's not true. We've been on the show for 3 years. There's been 2 coaches that I've said, 2 NFL coaches that I've said you should fire them today. Freddie Kitchens a month ago and Jason Garrett a month ago. First 2 years of the show, never said about anybody, even if we knew it was probably should happen to a few, because it's indefensible. And I said after the New England game, fire Jason Garrett today, nothing bad can come of it. Probably nothing good comes of it, nothing bad comes of it. And the response was, well, you can't. They play in 4 days. And I was like, okay, fair enough. Very short week.
And it wasn't a terrible loss to the Patriots.
Wasn't a terrible loss, but the reason I said it then was because it was Jerry Jones made it very clear he was firing him.
Right.
And I was like, if everyone knows he's firing him, the only chance you have is you're not going to get your best out of your players when everyone knows the coach is a total lame duck. He went into the season lame duck. Now he's actually, whatever legs he had beneath him got chopped out even further. Then you get embarrassed by Buffalo. And I came on here that Friday and I said, well, now you got a regular week. Fire him. No, can't do it. They play the next Thursday. Then they get embarrassed by Chicago. Now you have an extended week. Fire him. No, you can't. Well, now you're about to have a nice long off season. And so, of course, they won't fire him. There's 2 days after the season, his contract will expire, and they will not renew it. But no, there's no way he can save his job. And it's at this point, it's no longer to me a tenable position that he should retain his job moving forward.
Look, the staff in Dallas has been turned over a bunch of times, except for Jason. So there really isn't a lot of guys that they can go to at this point or during this course of the season say, okay, we're gonna move on from Jason and we're gonna promote who?
Right. Rod Marinelli, Chris Richard.
Who are you going to put in that position to give yourself a better chance to be successful over the rest of the season? And one thing that Jason has shown is they started slow the year before, but they were able to finish strong and they won the division. They made the playoffs. So there was a playoff game. There was a track record there. Okay, and yesterday there still was a chance that he could have saved his job if they'd come out and played well and won the game. And I think you would have had to win the game in probably a convincing fashion. But now you're division champs. Jerry feels like he's justified in saying with Jason, but to lose the game the way that they did, to lose the game and be at an emotional disadvantage, not be as fired up as the Eagles, that to me is worse than a lot of the things that happened in the game. But the situation at the end of the game where you don't have your best players and all those things combined, it's just going to be almost impossible.
Can I say real quick, Broussard, for the audience, in case this is your first day ever watching the show, what you heard right there from Coach is, without question, the most fiery takedown of a head coach I've ever heard from him. That was as close to, this guy is a total doofus, as I've ever heard him say.
He did not
say that, but I'm like, putting it through the Coach Mangini filter, that was, you were as upset as Cowboys fans are watching the end of that football game.
Well, look, I grew up a Cowboys fan, and I have a little bit of softness in my heart for them just from that experience. And I have a lot of friends who are on that staff that I think are very good coaches. It's when you're in those, and here's the other thing I'll say is, Dak Prescott's looking for that big contract. I think that he lost a lot of money during the course of the season. What has he done? Yeah, the numbers, if you want to look at the numbers in sort of its own okay, but when you look at these games and whether or not he's been a force multiplier, whether or not he's won in big moments, he hasn't. And we talk about all this great talent. Well, when's the talent going to show up? When are they going to start being accountable for their actions? And I guess, look, every single game the coach has to go out and give some sort of Newt Rockney or whatever, win one for the Gipper speech to get these highly paid Pro Bowlers to actually perform at a level that may be suitable enough to win a game against another team that's, 500.
Well, barring the miracle run to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship, Jason Garrett, I think, has to go. And I'm not convinced, as you guys seem to be, I'm not convinced they're not going to make the playoffs, because I really have questions about whether Philadelphia will beat the Giants next year. Now, maybe I'll be wrong, or next week. And I think Dallas will beat Washington. So they might sneak in the playoffs, but there's no way I see them winning the 2 games to get to the conference championship and then obviously win that and get to the Super Bowl. So, look, it's been 9 years. You've had 3 times where you made the playoffs. We'll see what happens this year. You've had, 4 winning seasons? You had 3 straight 8-8 years with Tony Romo healthy. He missed 1 game during that stretch. They could have fired Jason Garrett years ago, and it would have been justified. Nobody would have raised how'd you do that? You didn't give him enough time. So you've given him plenty of time. I mean, this is a job, Coach, where you get a few years. He's got 9. What are we talking about? With
the owner who's not usually the most sympathetic owner.
If Jerry Jones if they don't make the playoffs or make it and get beat in the first round, if Jerry Jones doesn't fire him, he's showing you he cares more about control and being able to have his hands all up in the stuff, in the football decisions, than he cares about winning.
Look, I think that Jerry Jones has been incredible. When you give someone 9 years, that is a incredible amount of time to be successful. And in fairness to Jason, though, this is a very unique dynamic. This is a little bit like Al Davis and the Raiders. You've got to be a specific type of head coach in order to work with an owner who's also the GM.
But the other element is the 9 years part of it, because this is something Coach and I talk a lot of abstract football ideas off the air. And one of the things that I've always wondered is if you just had league average coach and GM, and you said, we are giving you 8 years. That's the number I've always used when we've talked about it. 8 years, locked and loaded, no chance you're being fired. At the end of those 8 years, even if the coach is not a great coach, how much better off would you be than the teams that constantly turn over coaches? The Jets and the Browns and the teams that you might have a really good coach. It's this year's disappointing, we fire him. The Dolphins have done it. The Cardinals. And just we have a program, we have a type of player we try to draft, We have a coach that his message is going to filter on to our young players, to our veterans, to everyone. Because one of the benefits that New England has is that not only does everyone in the division always fire their coach, they never do. So it's not just that Belichick's great. It's that he's been there so long, all the gaps are filled in. There's no wasted time. There's no wasted motion.
Yeah, there's an incredible efficiency when you have continuity because the scouts know what they're looking for.
Yes.
The players, the reps that they have year in and year out build up. The reps as a coaching staff builds up. You get to take advantage of all the other guys that are fired who want to turn over their roster, and you get some of their good players. Yeah, it's an incredible.
And the Cowboys have had that edge.
You've had that for 9 years.
You've had that for 9 years. Exactly right. And so I think you thought that 13-3 year, we're taking advantage of it. That was year 6. It's like even with a rookie quarterback, because we have all this continuity, because we have all this talent, look at what we can do even with our quarterback going down. But since then, it's been 3 increasingly ordered disappointing seasons, and that gets the coach fired.
All right, let's play a little in or out. Yesterday, the Eagles picked up their biggest win of the season over the Cowboys. They now control their own destiny. Chris Broussard, you in or out on the Eagles being a threat in the playoffs?
I am out. Like I said, look, one win in which you score 17 points over dysfunctional 7-7 team is not going to convince me that you're one of the elite teams in the league. So I think they go out and lose their first game. Assuming they make it, they lose their first game in the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm out, even though I like their playoff experience over the last 2 years, and I think that does help in the playoffs. They've been as inconsistent as the Cowboys have. They were just more consistent and a little bit better yesterday.
Yeah, of course, I'm out. This team is going to host, whoever wins this division, is going to host the loser of Seattle, San Francisco next weekend, and they're going to lose to them. I'm as excited as anyone can be to bet on that football game and to bet against the home winner of the NFC East. And I've losing all my Philly credibility. I was just trying to win these people back.
Yeah, that's
a good win. You're not. You are who you are, which is right now a banged up, disappointing team that beat an even more disappointing team this weekend.
Except Seattle's going to be a banged up.
They are all banged up, Seattle. And in case anyone cares, I was in on that last one, but we moved away so quickly that no one even remembers. Lamar Jackson was up to his usual tricks, carving apart the Browns yesterday. He set the NFL record for most touchdown passes in a season for a player before their 23rd birthday. Broussard, you in or out on the Ravens being the best bet to win the Super Bowl out of the AFC?
Look, it's hard to bet against the Ravens. I love him. And one thing about Lamar Jackson, you saw it even on that highlight, his touch, too. People don't talk about his soft touch on some of these passes, his placement. So they look great. But look, I've got, as you call it, pick integrity.
Take integrity.
Take integrity.
Yep.
I picked Kansas City to reach the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year. And as good as I feel about Baltimore, I feel good enough about the Chiefs to think they can beat them. So I'm going with Kansas City. I'm out.
You're out. I'm going to go in, and here's the reason why. I think that playing in Baltimore is going to be very difficult for anybody throughout the AFC, and this offense is so unique to prepare for. It's similar to college football when you face some of those unique, whether it's the wing tee or whatever it is, that you don't see on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. It's a unique set of problems that's just so hard to prepare for. I think it gives them a big edge.
Baltimore's been awesome. Baltimore's won 11 in a row. Baltimore looks to be the most complete team in football. Understand all of that. I am out for 2 reasons right now. One is because there is a level of uncertainty of Lamar in the postseason. Lamar's league MVP, I think he's a superstar. We've only seen him in the one playoff game. Obviously, that one playoff game, he underperformed for 3.5 quarters. And the other reason is this. The team I think they're going to have to go through, Kansas City, has played them twice. They've beat them both times, and that was with a Chiefs defense that was in the bottom third of football. Last 5 weeks, the Chiefs have the #1 scoring defense, the #1 pass defense, the #1 red zone defense. That guy right there is still the best player in football. So I also am going to stick with my preseason Super Bowl pick, the Kansas City Chiefs, so I am out. But that will be an amazing conference championship game, Chiefs at Ravens in Baltimore, in a game that I will go to through hell or high water.
Assuming the Chiefs get past the Patriots at some point.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, on to the Browns.
Beat
now,
them
yesterday,
twice, no problem.
OBJ was seen yelling on the sidelines. Looked like he was arguing with Freddie Kitchens. OBJ claims he was arguing about the refs. Broussard, you in or out on the Browns being a playoff team if they had an average head coach?
What does OBJ get driven by in this question? This question's about the coach. We're just showing Odell's
We're just
mad.
showing the ugly parts of the game.
Yeah, he didn't get a pass interference call, man. He's upset. He and
15
Freddie are
yards
talking about
earlier.
it. Go ahead.
I am out. I think if they had a super elite coach, a Bill Belichick, a Andy Reid, then yes, I think they probably make the playoffs. But with just a better coach than Freddie Kitchens, average, mediocre guy, I don't think they get in. I think they're young. I think they have some attitude issues. I think next year they'll be better. I think they'll come together. They'll be more mature. They'll be humbled because they were talking all types of smack in the preseason. We're gonna be so good. People think we're cheating and all that stuff. I think that showed immaturity and that's bitten them. I think next year they'll learn from that and be better.
It's hard to be a first-year head coach. There's no manual that you get in order to navigate through all the different decisions that you have to make. And then when you're put together with a team of guys that have these incredibly strong personalities, it doesn't look like there's very much institutional support in terms of disciplining guys. And in a microcosm, you see Odell's play yesterday. He makes a really nice catch, and then he goes to the sideline. He gives some sort of
He's been doing it all
symbol, I know, but he waves on the sideline, gets a personal foul penalty. To me, that is the microcosm of the Cleveland Browns. It's talented player, good play, and then make a mistake that's a self-inflicted wound that you just can't keep recovering from all those decisions.
Odell's 6th year in the league should be noted. I believe that is his first unsportsmanlike conduct penalty of that variety. But regardless, I'm in. They're 6-8. They're 6-9. The Raiders are still alive for the playoffs. They need 2 more wins to be a playoff team this year or be alive going into Week 17. Hell, they were alive going into yesterday. The Rams game early in the year with an average head coach, they win that football game. That was the game where they ran the ball on 4th and 7, where they threw the ball 4 straight times on 1st and goal from the 4. The Seattle game, which they were dominating. Hell, the Ravens game yesterday with better play calling, they at least still have a lead at the end of the first half. So I'm in. Baker needs to play better, but they had the worst combination you can have. Awful quarterback play and awful coaching throughout the season. None of those involve Odell Beckham, by the way. So I am in that they could have been and should have been a playoff team this year.
This was one of Odell's better years.
Oh, my God.
I was waiting. All right, the red-hot Baltimore Ravens in Cleveland to face the Browns yesterday. Baltimore actually struggled out of the gate, not scoring until just over a minute left in the second quarter. But after that touchdown, they would score on their next 4 drives. Lamar was good again, 238 yards through the air, another 103 on the ground with 3 total touchdowns. Ravens are good, Browns are not. Here's Lamar after the game.
13-2. 13-2, that's dope. We got a great group of guys. I'm happy right now. I'm startled. We're gonna celebrate on the plane probably, but I'm just happy. We got a great ride going on right now. We just got to keep it going. We want to get to the Super Bowl. I'm just happy. We're 13-2 right now.
There's so many things that I like about him. And then Dusty told me this morning he went around and learned everyone's name on the entire security staff, everyone in the building. Just a really great guy, and he seems to be handling the moment very well. Nick, is anyone beating the Ravens in the AFC?
The Ravens right now are the best team in football. I don't think anyone would object to that. They're on an 11-game winning streak. If you like I love Football Outsiders. They have really smart, albeit nerdy stats. DVOA says this is one of the top 10 teams through 15 games of the last 30 years. That this is a few spots behind the undefeated Patriots. The number 1 team on that list is the 91 Washington team. That this is right now a team that is playing like an all-time team. Is anyone beating them? I think Kansas City's got the best shot of anybody. Kansas City was my pick before the year, and Kansas City right now is playing its best football of the season, bar none. The Ravens' defense the last 3 months, 2.5 months, has been exceptional. The Chiefs' defense the last 5 weeks have been the best defense in football, and they still have that guy right there. And I do wonder, to me, there are 3 legitimate questions for Baltimore. One is, after last week's game, health. Was Mark Ingram, was that a cramp? or is that a real calf strain?
He's an MRI, I think, today.
MRI today. He is a critical component to their offense. Another Mark Andrews got banged up, and then we saw Lamar popped right up, but Lamar took a big shot.
That was a big hit.
So one question is health. The other question is, how much will the layoff hurt them? I'm sure Baltimore wish they could just keep playing. They've won 11 games in a row. They haven't really even, aside from the San Francisco game, been tested into the fourth quarter in most of these games. They now have a Week 17 game. We don't know who's going to play, but we know they know doesn't matter. Then they have a week off. Then they're going to be playing a team, whomever it is, that just won a playoff game and seemingly is feeling good about themselves. And the last question, and this one is not because it's Lamar. It would be this case for any young quarterback that either has no playoff experience or their only playoff experience is bad, which is, how will Lamar do in the postseason? Those are, to me, three real questions. The Chiefs, on the other hand, right now are the healthiest they've been all year. They are the hottest they've been all year to go along with Baltimore, but they obviously are going to have to keep going, keep playing, because their seeding's not yet settled and they could get the bye. And we know Patrick Mahomes can perform in the playoffs. For all those reasons, the Chiefs are still my pick, taking nothing away from Baltimore. I think Baltimore will probably be a 4-point favorite in the AFC Championship game at home, and they've earned that given what they've done this season.
Look, it's easy to make the case for Baltimore. I mean, among the things you mentioned, but also John Harbaugh. He is a proven Super Bowl champion coach.
It's a great point.
Andy Reid, I like Andy Reid, but a lot of people think he's the Mike D'Antoni of the NFL. He has not gotten it done in the postseason. He has been to the Super Bowl, but obviously hasn't won it. So that is a question mark, but I do think you can make a case for the Chiefs. Another question with Jackson that you didn't bring up, or Baltimore in general. What if they get behind? Okay, now they were behind the Cleveland yesterday, and as you 6-0, but as you said, Cleveland made some dumb mistakes and play calls and stuff, time management at the end of the first half. Kansas City won't do that. Kansas City is also that team that can put them in a hole, can put them in a 13-0 hole, a 21-7 hole, something like that with their offense. So if they get behind, obviously you've got to start throwing the ball. And as well as Lamar has thrown it, he's been throwing it with the threat of the run. When you know you've got to pass because they're behind and time is short, how is he going to respond? You talked last week about they still don't get their receivers involved too much.
Nope.
It's mainly the running backs and the tight ends. And so that's another thing that Kansas City, with their new defense playing well. As you mentioned, great against the pass, tops in the league against the pass lately. They're also 7-1 on the road. So this is a team that can travel. So I do think there's a good argument to be made that Kansas City can prevail.
Let me add one other thing for Baltimore, because even if you're watching right now and you're like, I don't believe in the Chiefs are going to lose to the Titans, the Ravens are going to coast this. Whomever comes out of the AFC is going to be in for a monster opponent in the Super Bowl. Right now in the NFL, of the 6 best teams in football, 4 of them play in the NFC. One of them's playing tonight. We saw one of them yesterday with a big comeback against the Titans in New Orleans. Seattle obviously fell on its face a bit. San Francisco with a big comeback against the Rams. So whomever comes out of the AFC is going to face what I think is the best team of the superior conference in the Super Bowl, whether that's Baltimore or Kansas City.
But I definitely think of those 2 teams, and I'll even throw in New England as a 3rd team, I think those 3 teams can play with whoever comes out of the NFC.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern.